Don't you just tell me about this church and its importance?
It's a very important church, Eric. It's probably more important than people give it credit for. Worship started back here in 500 AD, and there would have always been a wooden church here until a more substantial fabric was built. We know that in Norman times, in the 11th century, there was a solid building here, and there is still parts of the Norman church you can see around the back. It carried on and was a mother church for the area, serving some 40,000 acres, many villages, and even Cockermouth as a town in those days didn't have a church. So it was important, and in the local area, of course, the gentry were involved with mining and quarrying locally, as well as farming.
So it was quite a rich church as well.
Indeed, it was. During that time, when it was a mother church, it was a rich church and enjoyed a degree of largesse from its patrons. Yes.
How did this famous, on a national scale, architect Butterfield come to be associated with this building?
Well, we think it was probably through the auspices of John Wordsworth, the son of William Wordsworth, the poet, who was vicar here for some 40 years. And indeed, his son as well, John, worked in the church and preached here during his father's latter years. But him, along with the Fletcher family and the Harris family locally, who lived in proximity to the church, then and other parishioners, then Butterfield would have been approached because he was doing work in the area. He was known. He's done work at Lamplugh, where he built St Michael's Church, and also work at St Bees Priory as well.
Now, what happened here?
We, unfortunately, about 6 or 7 years ago, we had a water leak in the valley gutter between the two chapels, between the south aisle and the main nave. And as a consequence of that, we had to take drastic action to repair and replace plaster and trusses in the nave, wooden trusses in the nave. And as a result of that, we lost some of the ceiling. And as a consequence, the parishioners have been working to fund the repair and the restoration of those painted ceilings.
Presumably you have the option of doing a patch-up job or doing the whole lot.
Indeed we did, and it's very interesting you should ask that question because we were given 3 options. The first one was to simply patch it up in modern colours. The second option was to patch it up in a distressed way to make it match what exists there. And the third was to do the full job, to clean the ceiling, to stabilise the existing paintwork throughout the ceiling, and then to restore the missing parts and also to carry out some restoration in other areas. But in many ways it was almost a no-brainer for the PCC to shoot for the stars and go for the full job.
Well, let's make our way up the ladders and see how far you've got on with that job.
Okay.
Amanda, just give me an idea of your first impressions when you came into this building.
Well, it's a really beautiful ceilings, and it's quite unusual to see 3 complete ceilings, all from the similar period. Not much date difference between them, all by William Butterfield. So you've got the south aisle, you've got the nave, and you've got the chancel, and they're all surviving. So yeah, it's fantastic.
And how much damage was there when you first came in here?
Well, initially, the most obvious areas of damage were these 3 panels here, which were completely new plaster, and the timbers surrounding as well. There'd been a gully leak a few years ago, and they'd had to replaster and splice in new timbers. So that was the most obvious area. You'd also got some areas down the west end of the ceiling where there'd obviously been other areas of water penetration. You've got black mould and you've got salt pustules. And other areas weren't so noticeable. You could see there were some fractures and some smaller losses, but it was the main areas of loss that were most noticeable.
So these ones here are completely new paint.
Yeah, they've been recreated. The ceiling's painted in distemper paint, so we wanted to use the same materials to do the recreation.
But that must make it very, very difficult for cleaning, for example.
Yeah, distemper paint is water soluble, so you can only do dry cleaning. If you tried to use any water-based cleaners, then it would just completely wipe off. And there were some areas where obviously when they'd done the plastering, they tried to wipe down the surfaces to remove some of the plaster, and that had removed some of the original distemper as well, so we touched in those areas as well.
Looking at the rest of the ceiling, presumably, a ceiling that stood here for 150 years, 160 years, there's going to be bits of grot here and everywhere.
Yeah, no, there definitely are, but it's a conservation job rather than you don't want to repaint it. There are areas of loss, small areas of loss dotted throughout, but I mean you could spend weeks and weeks touching those in, but it's more a sympathetic restoration rather than a recreation.
And actually
other than the areas that have been lost.
They wouldn't be seen from the floor
No,
anyway.
you wouldn't see them from the floor, no. So what you do is you start with the most obvious areas and then step back and see. It's just to get a complete, like a balanced finish to it.
And have you finished now?
We finished this ceiling, we're still working in the nave. We'll be finished by the end of this week.
It'll be great when the scaffolding comes down.
Hopefully, yeah, it'd be nice to see it with the scaffolding down.
Yeah, absolutely. See it as it's not been seen for a very long time.
Yes.